Greetings! My name's Soozcat. I run the blog Confessions of a Laundry Faerie, and today marks the end of week 3 after my duodenal switch surgery, which took place August 2nd, 2018. I was warned that the third week would be difficult, and they weren't wrong, but we'll talk about that in a second. First, some stats. Once again, for those who are joining us the first time, I am 48 years old. I am just under 5'4". My highest weight was 270 pounds. My weight at surgery was 236 pounds, and today I weighed in at 216 pounds, 0.8, so close to 217. What can I tell you about week 3? I was warned by my surgeon, because I'm still on that clear liquid diet, that week 3 would be tough. And he specifically said the reason why week 3 is going to be tough is that for the first time after you came back from the hospital, you're going to feel hungry. And I said, oh, well, the first couple of weeks after I was back from the hospital, I just wanted to sleep all the time. I didn't feel hungry at all. When you've lost about 90% of your stomach, the hormone ghrelin, which is responsible for making you feel hungry, most of it's gone. And not only that, but as I've said, I was just wanting to get over feeling sick and being in pain and everything else. I wasn't thinking about eating at all. Well, this week I must be feeling a whole lot better because I did get hungry, and I got really hungry. And furthermore, I was in a situation where it was very, very tempting to cheat on the clear liquid diet. Not only was I hungry, but my niece went back to college this week, so she's not here. My husband went to scout camp this week, so he wasn't here. It was just me and the kitty. And the cat didn't care as long as I was feeding her on a regular basis. So, it was very tempting. And at one point, I gave in to temptation and made myself a little sandwich and ate it. And that didn't work out well at all. My stomach said, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? There's no room for this here. I'm just a teeny tiny stomach the size of a banana. This won't fit. And as a result, I ended up barfing the thing back up. I didn't have much of a choice. My stomach won the day on that one. So it's kind of a self-correcting problem. Haven't tried to mess around with that since. So, yeah, if you are warned that this is going to be a tough week, especially if you're still on a clear liquid diet, believe them when they tell you this, because it's true. The other thing that I wanted to go over that I thought might be helpful for people who are considering getting a duodenal switch surgery is the kinds of things you need to do before you get a DS. It's not one of those things where you can just walk into a surgeon's office and say, I'd like a duodenal switch, Tuesday, okay? It doesn't work like that. You have to go through quite a bit, especially if you have any kind of insurance covering this. Your insurance will have specific hoops they want you to jump through before they will give you an okay. And so I thought I would go over some of the things that I needed to do before I ended up getting DS. The first thing I did was at the end of December 2017, I went in to have my initial consult with my surgeon to talk about the possibility of bariatric surgery and also which surgery I was interested in having done. Because I had a couple on my plate. I was leaning very heavily toward gastric sleeve at first. But DS was something that seemed a lot more palatable to me, in part because it was the surgery that seemed to do the best job of getting rid of, essentially getting rid of type 2 diabetes. But remember also, as I go over this list, that my surgeon is very thorough, he's very conservative, and he's very keen on making sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed. So your experiences with your surgeon may be a little different. Anyway, with that caveat, the other thing you need to have in mind, if you have insurance, you need to make absolutely sure that your insurance will cover the surgery well before you have it. Because if they won't, if they have some sort of an exception for bariatric surgery, your surgeon will not be able to petition the company to get an okay for you. You need to make sure that they will cover it first. Or you have to undergo self-pay and determine exactly how much it's going to cost you and whether you can afford it. I honestly wish that more insurance companies would cover this surgery, because it seems to me that they would end up spending a lot less money on patients who are obese and or diabetic if they were to allow them to get this surgery, because it does make a difference for good, and it does make it possible for you to get off a lot of the things that are oh, hi. Well, our guest star is Roxy the cat. She may be wandering in and out of here. She does what she wants. She cannot be trained. Anyway, so my insurance required, hi Roxy, we'll cut that bit. Shoo. My particular insurance required that I be on a physician-supervised weight loss diet for at least 6 months before they would cover the surgery. And the surgeon-specific diet was what he calls the sandwich diet, which has nothing to do with actual sandwiches, which is probably why I ended up barfing one up. No, the sandwich diet is such in that it is layered from week to week. So the first week, for instance, you go on a high-protein, low-carbohydrate diet. The second week, you're on the clear liquid diet. The third week, you're back to high-protein, low-carb, and so on for 6 months. That was hard. Part of the reason why my surgeon wanted me to do that was because he wanted me to lose at least 10% of my initial weight. The reason why he wanted me to do that was, first of all, to be able to show that I could lose a little weight, at least, and also because he was going to be engaging in a robotically assisted laparoscopic surgery. And these particular types of surgeries do a lot better if your liver is a little bit smaller. If you can shrink your liver by dieting, it makes the surgery easier, and it makes the recuperation time a lot faster. So I did my best, although I did not lose 10% of my total weight. What's the other thing? Oh, I did a long list of labs with blood draws. I went to radiology and respiratory studies. They thumped me and poked me and pushed me all over the place, doing all these labs to determine whether I was medically healthy enough to get DS surgery. And oh, the other thing is that a few months beforehand, I underwent an endoscopy, the top-down, not bottom-up type, so that my surgeon could essentially see the lay of the land and determine, what my system looked like before he merrily started operating. By the way, if you cannot stand having blood draws, which are far from my favorite thing, since I do have a bit of a phobia regarding needles in my veins and so forth. If you can't stand to do them or you won't do them, DS surgery is not for you. I can't put it any more succinctly. You are going to need to do a number of different blood draws to check and make sure that your supplements are where they should be, that you have the right vitamin levels for good health. It is very easy to become malnourished if you don't. And for the first little while after surgery, you're going to have these labs done every 3 months, and then later every 6 months to a year. And this is necessary for your health. So if you don't think you're going to be able to do that, it's not for you. Just so you're aware. What else? I also underwent a psychological evaluation to make sure that I was mentally healthy enough to undergo duodenal switch surgery. And part of the reason why that's important, this is something that does change your life. I'm just now beginning to understand just how much it's going to change my life. And I had a lot of information from my surgeon, my ARNP, everybody else who was part of Dr. Srikanth's team talking to me about how this was going to change my life. And there are some people who can't handle it. Don't mean to be rude, but that's just kind of how it is. Some people can handle it and some people cannot. And so they do want you to talk to a psychiatrist or psychologist who is familiar with bariatric surgery to determine whether you are healthy enough to do this. Another thing we did, my husband and I took a mandatory pre-op education class together so that we would both be aware of what DS would do to me as physically, mentally, etc. So that we'd both be aware. One of the things that had worried me when I first came in to talk about bariatric surgery was that I'd read in a number of different places that a large number of people who undergo bariatric surgery and who are married or have a life partner end up getting divorced or separated. And that was not something I wanted to have happen in my marriage. So I talked to my ARNP about this, and to paraphrase wildly what she said, she said that a lot of the problems that arise after bariatric surgery are problems that are based in the nature of the relationships before the surgery happened. For instance, you may have an obese person who is married to someone or in a relationship with someone, and the relationship is very dysfunctional, but the obese person stays in that relationship because he or she believes no one else is going to love me. And when that person loses a lot of weight, then all of a sudden the nature of this dysfunctional relationship becomes a lot more clear, and the person starts wanting something better. So sometimes that happens. There are also situations where one partner or another has a sexual desire for someone who's obese as a life partner. And when that person loses a whole lot of weight, the entire nature of the relationship gets called into question. Neither one of those scenarios was an issue in my marriage. And when I mentioned that to my ARNP, she said, well, if that's the case, I don't see that there's going to be any problems with you having surgery. In fact, people who already have stable, loving relationships quite often report that after surgery, their relationships become better and happier. So I don't think you have anything to worry about. And thus far, I haven't really had anything to worry about because I'm married a great guy. And he's also my cameraman. Yay, cameraman! Anyway, that's about all I have to say for this week. I have some other interesting things to talk about, but that can wait till later. So again, my name's Soozcat. I run the blog Confessions of a Laundry Faerie, which can be found at laundryfaerie.blogspot.com. If you have questions, if you want to give me advice, I'm certainly up for it. If there's anything else that you'd like to discuss regarding DS surgery or what we discussed today, please make comments. If you would like to see more of what I'm doing, please subscribe and you'll find out when I post new videos. Anyway, that's all for this week. Thanks so much for your time. Bye.